Before we jump into this crazy video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification, because you don't want to miss more unbelievable neighborhood drama stories just like this one. Have you ever seen someone lose their mind over something as small as lawn chairs? Well, let me tell you, this story is about how a couple of foldable chairs in my yard managed to set off a chain of events so ridiculous. Even the police officer who showed up couldn't keep a straight face. It all started on a Saturday morning. The weather was perfect, not too hot, not too cold, the kind of day where sitting outside feels like a small vacation. So I pulled out two of my trusty old lawn chairs, set them on the grass in my front yard, and settled in with a cold drink and a good book. Simple, right? Nothing dramatic. But in every neighborhood, there's that one person. And in mine, that person was Karen. She lived 2 houses down, and she had made it her life's mission to control how everyone else lived. If she wasn't complaining about cars being parked too close to the curb, she was sending nasty emails about people's Christmas decorations being too bright. You get the picture? Now, my lawn chairs weren't fancy. They weren't broken or trashy either. They were just regular outdoor chairs. But apparently, in Karen's eyes, they were some kind of crime against humanity. She strutted over in her sun visor and oversized sunglasses, arms crossed like she was preparing to hand out a citation. "You can't just leave those in the front yard," she snapped. I looked up from my book, confused. They're chairs. I'm sitting in one." "They're an eyesore," she huffed, her voice rising as if I had committed some neighborhood felony. "This is a family community, not a campground." I almost laughed, but I bit my tongue. I tried to be polite and explained, "Karen, I'm just enjoying the weather. They'll be put away later." But oh no, reason wasn't good enough. She stormed back to her house, muttering something about standards and calling this in. I assumed she meant she was going to complain to the HOA again, which was her usual play. Except this time, she didn't stop at the HOA. 10 minutes later, I saw flashing lights. A police cruiser rolled up, and out stepped an officer who looked like he wasn't sure why he was even there. Karen rushed out of her house, like she had just caught me burying stolen goods in my yard. "Officer, there they are, the chairs. He refuses to move them." The officer turned to look at me, then back at her. His face twitched. And then he burst out laughing. The officer's laugh echoed down the street, and honestly, it was the best sound I'd heard all day. Karen, however, was not amused. She puffed up like a balloon ready to pop. "Why are you laughing?" she demanded, pointing at me like I had staged a crime scene. The officer tried to compose himself, but every time he glanced at my perfectly ordinary lawn chairs, another chuckle slipped out. Finally, he cleared his throat and asked, "Ma'am, are you seriously telling me you called 911? Over chairs?" Karen's eyes widened. "It's not just chairs. They're ruining the appearance of the whole neighborhood. People driving by will think this is some kind of campsite." At this point, I couldn't help it. I laughed too. The officer gave me a look, half amused, half exasperated, and shook his head. He turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, unless these chairs are blocking traffic, hiding a body, or shooting laser beams into someone's window, they're not breaking any laws." That should have been the end of it. But Karen wasn't ready to lose. She straightened her visor, jabbed a finger at the ground, and announced, "Well, it should be illegal. He's lowering property values." The officer blinked, and then, just to really rub salt in the wound, he strolled over to one of the chairs, sat down, and leaned back like he was on vacation. "Honestly," he said with a grin, "these are pretty comfortable." I nearly spit out my drink from laughing so hard. Karen gasped like he had betrayed her. "You can't just sit in them. That's encouraging him." But the officer wasn't done. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his sunglasses, and put them on with a smirk. "You know, I think this neighborhood could use more chairs like these. Nice place to unwind?" That did it. Karen was practically shaking. She stomped her foot on the pavement. "This is outrageous. I demand you make him take them inside." The officer stood, dusted off his uniform, and gave her the kind of look reserved for toddlers throwing tantrums. Ma'am, my job is to keep the peace. And the only disturbance I see right now is, well, you. The other neighbors had started peeking out of their windows, curious about the commotion. A couple even stepped outside, whispering and chuckling. The more attention Karen got, the redder her face became. She realized she wasn't winning. With one last glare at me, she snapped, "Fine! But this isn't over." Then she stormed back toward her house, muttering threats about higher authorities. The officer turned to me, shaking his head with a grin. "Good luck with her. Something tells me this isn't the last time you'll see me out here." And he was right. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. The officer drove away, still laughing, and I went back to enjoying my sunny afternoon. The chairs were right where I wanted them. The air was calm, and peace had returned, at least temporarily. But with Karen, peace never lasted long. The very next morning, I noticed something odd. When I went to grab the newspaper, my chairs weren't in the yard anymore. I froze. I knew I hadn't brought them in. Then I spotted them, dragged across the lawn, tipped on their sides near the hedge, like someone had tried to hide them. It didn't take a detective to figure out who was behind it. Karen had apparently decided if the police couldn't help her, she'd take matters into her own hands. I set the chairs back up, brushed them off, and chuckled. If she thought that was going to stop me, she was dead wrong. I sat down again, opened my book, and waited. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, Karen marched out of her house, phone in hand, clearly ready for round two. "You're unbelievable!" she shouted from the sidewalk. "I moved them for you, and you just put them back." "Karen," I said calmly, "they're my chairs, on my lawn. I don't think you're allowed to touch them." Her face turned crimson. "Don't you quote rules to me. If you won't cooperate, I'll escalate." I raised an eyebrow. "Escalate to what? Chair court?" That quip nearly made her explode. She stomped away, yelling over her shoulder, "You'll regret this." By the afternoon, I discovered what she meant. A few neighbors stopped by, shaking their heads. Apparently, Karen had gone door to door, collecting support for her crusade against my chairs. She'd knocked on doors, ranting about how I was trashing the neighborhood and setting a bad example. Most people just laughed her off. A couple of neighbors even came to sit in my chairs with me out of pure solidarity. One brought snacks. Another pulled up a cooler. Before long, my front yard looked less like a crime scene and more like a block party. And that's when Karen returned, horrified. She stood at the edge of my lawn, glaring at the small crowd like we'd formed a rebellion. "This is outrageous. You're turning this into a circus." I grinned. "No, Karen, we're just enjoying the chairs." Her jaw clenched. Without another word, she pulled out her phone again, dialing faster than I'd ever seen. This time, she wasn't calling the police. She was calling the HOA. If the police couldn't solve Karen's chair problem, she figured the homeowners association might. Within an hour of her call, I got the dreaded knock on my door. Two members of the HOA board stood there, clipboards in hand, looking very official. "Good afternoon," one of them began. A man named Greg. He adjusted his glasses like he was about to deliver a court ruling. "We've received a complaint regarding lawn furniture." Behind them, I could see Karen hovering on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching with a smug grin like she had just unleashed her secret weapon. I invited the HOA reps to step closer, and I gestured proudly toward the two perfectly ordinary chairs sitting in my yard. "You mean those?" Greg cleared his throat. "Yes, according to the complaint, these chairs are unsightly, disruptive, and, quote, turning the neighborhood into a low-class campground." I couldn't help but laugh. Unsightly? They're just chairs. Not broken. Not neon pink. Just chairs. The other board member, a woman named Linda, actually chuckled under her breath. She looked at Greg and said, "Honestly, they don't look bad at all." Karen gasped. "What?" "They ruin everything. You can't just let this slide." Greg flipped through his paperwork. "Karen, the HOA guidelines say residents should maintain their yards. There's nothing here about lawn chairs being prohibited." Karen stomped her foot. "Then add it. Make a new rule. This is unacceptable." Linda shook her head. We don't create rules because one person doesn't like something. That's not how this works. For once, I felt like the HOA was actually on my side. I leaned back in my chair with a grin. See? Nothing illegal. Nothing against the rules. Just me enjoying my yard. Karen's face twisted in frustration. She started ranting about neighborhood standards and property values again, her voice carrying down the street. By now, several neighbors had gathered to watch the show. A few even clapped when Linda said, "Frankly, this complaint is baseless." Karen's jaw dropped. She turned to the crowd, searching for support, but all she got were smirks and stifled laughs. Greg finally closed his clipboard. "This matter is settled. There's no violation here. Case closed." The HOA members walked away, leaving Karen standing alone on the sidewalk, fuming like a cartoon character with steam coming out of her ears. She glared at me, then at the neighbors, before storming back into her house and slamming the door. The neighborhood had spoken. The HOA had spoken. And the police had already laughed her off. But Karen, she wasn't finished. Not yet. Because the very next morning, I woke up to find a surprise waiting on my lawn. Sunday morning started off quiet. Too quiet. No Karen shouting, no HOA members knocking, no flashing lights. For a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she had finally given up. Then I opened my front door. Right there on my lawn, next to my two beloved chairs, sat a brand new sign. In bold, hand-painted letters it read, "No camping zone." I nearly fell over laughing. The sign was crooked, clearly homemade, and stuck into the ground with what looked like an old broom handle. It didn't take Sherlock Holmes to know exactly who had planted it. I dragged the sign out of the ground and leaned it against my porch. A few neighbors walking their dogs stopped and burst out laughing too. One even pulled out their phone to snap a picture. "She's lost it," they chuckled. Well, if Karen wanted a war of pettiness, I was ready to play. That afternoon, I went to the store, picked up 2 more lawn chairs, bright red ones this time, and added them to the collection. 4 chairs now sat proudly in my yard, lined up like thrones. When Karen saw them, her scream could probably be heard 3 streets over. She stormed out of her house, shaking her fists. "You're mocking me!" I grinned. "No, Karen, I'm just making sure everyone has a seat." By now, the neighborhood was fully entertained. A couple of people brought over their own chairs and joined the lineup. Before long, my front yard had turned into the unofficial hangout spot. Kids played on the sidewalk, parents chatted, and someone even brought a portable speaker for music. What had started as 2 simple chairs had become a neighborhood block party tradition. The best part? A week later, the same officer who had laughed the first time drove by on patrol. He slowed down, saw the chairs, saw the crowd, and pulled over. Karen rushed out, desperate. "Officer, it's gotten worse. He's multiplying them. You have to do something." The officer surveyed the scene, then calmly walked over to the row of chairs, sat down in one, and leaned back with a grin. "Looks like a friendly neighborhood to me." The crowd erupted in laughter. Karen, on the other hand, turned red, screamed into the sky, and stomped back inside her house, slamming the door so hard her windows rattled. From that day on, she never mentioned the chairs again. Not because she suddenly liked them, but because she realized she was outnumbered. The neighborhood had chosen fun over fussiness. And me? Well, I still sit in those chairs every weekend. Sometimes the officer even joins. And every time I do, I remember the day Karen called the cops over lawn chairs. And the cop couldn't stop laughing. If you enjoyed watching Karen lose it over lawn chairs, smash that like button, drop a comment with your favorite part of the story. And don't forget to subscribe for more wild stories that'll keep you laughing every week.